we're thrilled you're here to learn a little bit about transitioning maybe to ArcGIS Pro, or maybe just picking it up for the first time. We love this particular piece of software, and we're excited to have you join us and learning about it. So we'll get started. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the workshop, kind of set the stage, introduce things. But before we do any of that, I want to tell you about this organization that we are all part of. It's the University of California Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and that's essentially a network of folks around the state in cooperative extension offices and research and extension centers and on affiliated campuses. And all of us do applied work around agriculture, natural resources, nutrition, and youth development. And our goal, the goal of UCANR, is to connect the power of UC research to better communities. And we do this through a whole range of things. And one way we do this is through statewide programs. And some of you might have heard of things like CalFresh or 4-H or California Naturalists or UC Integrated Pest Management Program. These are all statewide programs run by UCANR. And one of those statewide programs, a small one, is called IGIS, Informatics and GIS program. And that's the one that I run, and that's the one that Sean and Andy and Robert and Shane are part of. And that's who is bringing this workshop to you today. And if you want to learn more, there's our website in the lower right. We do a ton of trainings. We love building things. We do research, and we fly a lot of drones. Anything to do with mapping, we're into it. And I think that's probably true of all of you. So who you are you are mostly from California. There were a few folks who signed on or who registered coming from Europe. So welcome to everybody. And before we tell you a little bit more, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about yourself. So in the chat, if you might put your name. You don't really have to put what you want to get out of the workshop, but you can if you're a quick typer, and your experience with Pro from 1 beginner to 5 expert. And we love all levels. So don't be shy. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's see who's going to kick us off in the chat. All right. Michaela, wonderful. Welcome, Denise. All right, great. We've got some beginners. Sean, 5 on a good day. Let's hope it's a good day, Sean. Nazifo, 1, great beginner. Love an overview of Pro, 1, love it. You're in the right place. Kat, Shane's a 5, solid 5. Antonio, a 4, excellent. So some of you have used Pro before, and some of you are coming to it brand new. That's fine. It's a really great piece of software. Hector, very happy to hear this. You got to transfer from ArcMap because the Esri's going to shut that down, and so we're all going to be using Pro soon. So good on you to make this transition. Welcome, Peggy. Welcome, Antonio. Okay, so you guys keep those going. I'm going to turn back to the presentation here, but welcome everybody. All levels are appreciated. I feel like I missed a slide. I did. I missed us, who we are. So let me tell you a little bit about us. I'm Maggie Kelly. I'm the director of this statewide program in Informatics and GIS. I'm a cooperative extension specialist and professor, and I'm based on the Berkeley campus. And my research all revolves around mapping, mostly terrestrial systems, but mapping really pretty broadly. Sean Hogan is going to be running the workshop with you today. He's a remote sensing expert, PhD. He's based in the ANR Davis office. And then behind the scenes, anytime you have a problem, something's not working, you need a little bit of extra help, you're not sure where this is or that is, we've got 3 great people. Shane Fire, Andy Lyons, Robert Johnson are all there to help. They're all part of IGIS, and they're all Pro whizzes. So Andy's probably going, I'm not a Pro whiz, but I I know you are. So, and Shane and Robert are absolutely pro whizzes. So you're in good hands here, and let's carry on. So why you might want to use ArcGIS Pro, you might want to, and some of these might be reasons you guys have, you might want to produce publication quality maps. You can have really good control over design and cartography in Pro. You might want to retain tight control over your projections in your data. And if that doesn't make sense yet, don't worry about it. But Pro allows you to have really tight control over some aspects of your data. You might want to perform advanced analysis like image processing and remote sensing, spatial modeling, work with multiple data types, work in a reproducible way, and work really seamlessly in a coding environment. All of these are reasons why you might want to use Pro. It's a wonderful piece of software, but there can be a steep learning curve to it. It's a big, hefty beast. And so today we're just going to get you sort of introduced to it. Some of the advanced reproducibility work you might want to do does require familiarity with coding. Some doesn't. You can get away with a lot kind of in a graphical way through Model Builder. But if you really want to do some advanced reproducible work, it will require some coding. It's not the most nimble of software, and it's not free. So, it's not perfect. It's not everybody's favorite piece of software, but it does a lot. It does a lot really well. So what we're going to do today, we've done our introductions. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the software constellation looks like, and then what we plan to do today in the workshop portion. And the workshop portion is going to focus on one of our research and extension centers, Lynn Cove, down near Fresno in the California Central Valley. It's one of our research and extension centers that focuses on citrus. It's a really neat looking place from the air, from above. So we've got some imagery to show off to you. I'm going to introduce you to that, and then we're going to go through a really quick kind of basics of GIS, talking about spatial data, talking about workflow, a little bit about projections, and then a little bit about design and cartography. And then we're going to turn it over to Sean and really dive into this Lynn Cove data set that we've assembled, do some neat data wrangling to bring your data in, understand how you work with all of these layers, create new features, do some interpolations, make pretty maps. And so to do this, we're all here today because we're thinking about working with Pro and Esri software. The flagship desktop software is ArcGIS Pro. That's what we're going to do today. It requires a license. ArcGIS Esri also has ArcGIS Online, which is the cloud-based software. And with an ArcGIS Pro license, you'll get access to ArcGIS Online. There are similarities between these two, and there are differences. So the strengths of ArcGIS Online, and we're not really going to focus on that today, but we do have workshops that do focus on ArcGIS Online. It's a great way to create web maps, web apps. You can load tons of apps. There's an app universe in Esri that blows the mind, including things like field maps. So you can take data from your phone and bring it up into the web. Lots and lots of simple analysis, but more complex analysis is being unveiled really every month. It's fast, it's intuitive, it's browser-based. You don't have to have a license, a license file to enable this to work. It's great. If you're into it, check out workshops that we're going to have later on about ArcGIS Online. ArcGIS Pro, this we're going to do today, the strengths are really in this sort of deep analysis of spatial data, really good control of cartography and design, great control of your projections and your data, advanced analysis like remote sensing, spatial modeling, working with UAV, LiDAR data, and working with coding. Both ArcGIS Online and Pro allow you to access huge repositories of spatial data, which is fantastic. And Esri continues to upload more functionality to ArcGIS Online. So the differences between, ArcGIS Pro and ArcGIS Online in terms of analysis capacity are diminishing, but you still can do a lot more in Pro. And Pro is really just a bigger piece of software. Again, it's the desktop, it's the local. That's what we're going to do today. And where we're going to do it is at this Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center. It's down in the South Central Valley, as I said. It's a citrus experimental research facility. Lots of cool citrus orchards of trees with different shapes and sizes, and they look amazing in the imagery. And you're going to be able to check that out in the workshop. Things we're going to be doing today in the workshop: you're going to be finding and loading data. You're going to be playing around with the data. You're going to be doing some joins between tabular data and spatial data. It's a classic GIS process. You're going to be doing some querying. You're going to be interpolating points, and you're going to make a fancy map, such as this one here. What it's going to look like in Pro. This is what Pro looks like for those of you who haven't seen it yet. And Sean's going to explain. He's going to walk you through this. But the basic gist is there's this ribbon across the top that says project map, insert analysis view, that kind of walks you through aspects of your workflow. On the left, typically you have your table of contents. In the middle, you have your viewer. On the right, you have a lot of other ways to interact. Right now, I'm just showing your catalog, which is how you're going to interact with data. So you'll be playing around with this. But let's just briefly say what GIS is. What is this thing that we're going to be doing this analysis in? So Pro is a software package that enables us to work with geographical data, spatial data. It's a GIS, and a GIS is just a software toolkit that allows us to work with geo-referenced data. And that's the fundamental aspect of a GIS. The 3D world, we essentially strip into these 2D sheets. So we can have elevation, we can have imagery, we can have polygons, lines, points, and all of them are tied together by a common georeference system. In this case, latitude and longitude, so we have an X and a Y and some kind of attribute. These are all just some representation of reality. They all have some measure of uncertainty. All the GIS does is it takes those layers and it pulls them back together again and allows you to analyze them in a spatial way. And this is a crowded slide, so don't worry about it. But the gist is there's so many essential, critical GIS analysis workflows that you're going to do when you work with GIS. And some of them we're going to do today. There are these data tasks. So you're going to be doing this. You're going to be pulling data in. You're going to be doing kind of these joins to bring spatial data and attribute data together. But there's lots more you can do. You could edit data. You can convert back and forth between raster and vector, which I'll explain in a moment. With vector data, which is like points, lines, and polygons, you can do certain things like overlays or geocoding, or this process called geo-enrichment that Esri likes. You can look at networks. On the raster side, there's a whole suite of fantastic processes that you can do. You can look at topography, you can look at hydrology, site suitability. All remote sensing is raster based. And then, of course, there's the design aspect. You can create a map or a visualization of your work. And you don't just do these one at a time. There's a lot of linkages between all of these. You can go back and forth between any of them, but there's some fundamental spatial workflows that just are a result of those layers of spatial data that I mentioned before. The way I like to think about GIS is in this very clear, organized workflow manner. So you want to start with what's your question, and you want to find the data. You're going to do some kind of analysis and do some kind of display. And in each of these steps, there are things that you're going to pay attention to. And Sean will go through this in the workshop itself. But you're thinking about a question, you're finding your data. There's a suite of these workflows, these analysis tools you can use, and then you want to create some kind of map. The data you'll be working with is going to be raster or vector. And vector data is points, lines, and polygons. Points are the fundamental unit. Lines are made up of connected points. Polygons are made up of collected lines. Spatial information is explicit, which means every point knows where it is. every line knows what it's attached to in terms of points, and every polygon knows which lines make up its boundaries. So vector data is really, it's very precise, and it actually is, it's a legacy from the old way we used to make maps, which is just drawing lines. And as I said, spatial data is explicit, it's contained within it, which means you can ask questions like, which way am I going? What's to the left of me? What's to the right of me? Those are called topological questions. Raster data is different. Raster is just single grid cells, a collection of grid cells, the same size and shape, usually square, that have some value attached to them. Usually, or sometimes raster data can be in bands or layers of these. The cells in here can contain one value. You can have fine resolution or coarse resolution raster. Spatial information is implicit, which means each cell doesn't have a piece of data associated with it that says, this is where I am. It's all implied. It's just a matrix of rows and columns. So raster tends to be the kind of data that we use for complex spatial modeling because it's a lot faster. Vector data can be very cumbersome the more of it that you combine because of all that precision, but they both have roles. They both play great roles in GIS. We work with vector data all the time. We work with point data, with line data, with polygon data all the time. We work with raster data all the time, DEMs, elevation models, remote sensing data is all raster. Land cover data derived from satellite data is raster, and climate data. These are all typical raster data examples that we use or we work with. Another thing to mention is file formats. So raster and vector are the data models that we use, but file formats, what do they come in? And they can come in a lot of different ways, and file formats can be local or they can be cloud-based. And local file formats, you guys who have used Pro a lot or used ArcMap a lot know these. You can have shape files, which are these collection of individual files that have to all be sort of pulled together. There's also grids. That's an Esri native file format for raster data. And then the more commonly you'll find increasingly now geodatabases. And geodatabases are these big containers that can contain all kinds of spatial information and kind of the connections between them. So you can have a geodatabase that has points and lines and sometimes rasters and kind of an understanding of how all those layers work together. So geodatabase is a very typical file format that you're going to be using, especially if you're working in the Esri environment. When you move to the cloud, and again, I mentioned ArcGIS Online at the beginning, and that is a cloud software. Data are not, they're not the file format changes when you're working in the cloud. And we typically think of cloud data as layers with associated services. So instead of a shape file, you'll have a vector layer that has services associated with it. And we're not going to do a ton with cloud-based stuff, but I'm just pointing out the differences. The fact that you have these cloud formats means there are so many wonderful places for you to find spatial data. And Esri makes these extremely easy. We're going to do a little bit of this in the workshop. So there are two great sources for finding spatial data for this afternoon, as well as later on in your work. One is ArcGIS Online, and that's kind of a community populated portal of spatial data. So, we in IGIS push data up to ArcGIS Online in our particular portal, and some of it's public, which means when you go away, you can find that data and use it, depending on the services defined. The second portal is called Living Atlas of the World, and this is where Esri has spent a ton of time curating specific data sets. So it's a great place to start, because if you find the data that you need in Living Atlas of the World, it's gone through some kind of curation process, and it's typically pretty comprehensive and pretty well validated. ArcGIS Online, it's kind of catch as catch can. Like, I mean, you know, there's some stuff up there that's just somebody's, you know, research project, or somebody was playing around and they published it. So it's a little bit more, you know, you got to pay attention on ArcGIS Online to what you're getting. But two amazing places to find spatial data. All right, bit of a switch here. We're just doing a quick run through basics of GIS. We got to talk, we're talking about data. We got to talk about projections. This is the fundamental thing that differentiates spatial data from just an Excel table of, you know, tree sizes or something. Spatial data, because it's on the surface of the earth, has to have a projection associated with it. And the projection is the mathematical transformation that takes that surface of the earth and flattens it out. It goes from 3D to 2D. And because the earth is a sphere, it's not really a sphere, it's an ellipsoid. It's not really an ellipsoid because it's kind of bumpy. So it's not a perfect transformation, that 3D to 2D. And so typically different areas will say, this is the projection for this area. So there's a projection for the US, there's a projection for California, there's a projection for each county in California, because we want to make sure that we are getting the best representation in 2D of that 3D surface. And so in California, where we'll be working, there are there's several choices. There are four main projections that you will commonly find. The first you will commonly find is called geographic, and it isn't really a transformation because it just says 1 degree latitude equals 1 degree longitude. And it's the simplest, but it's terrible for analysis because 1 degree latitude does not equal 1 degree longitude in California. And so it does a lot of stretching that you don't want. The next one that's commonly used is Thiel-Albers, and this is a California specific projection that's been optimized for area calculations. It's what all statewide data served by the state of California uses. It's pretty good, but it does have some kind of stretch, some amount of stretching, because California is a big piece of the world. The next one is UTM, Universal Transverse Mercator. This is a worldwide system that essentially takes that globe and splits it into sections or gores, and each of those sections gets its own projection. And so California is split between zone 10, that's section 10, and section 11. This is also a good one for analysis. And then there's another one called state plane, which splits the state into 6 zones. And this is the smallest piece of real estate for a projection in California. And it's commonly used by surveying professionals. It's not as commonly used in scientific research, but you will encounter data in state plane. And then there's Web Mercator, which is this web-based projection that a lot of web mapping applications uses, and it's not very good for analysis. If you're gonna be doing analysis, you want to pull your data into Pro and work with the projection that works for you. And you can go back and forth between these. There's lots of algorithms to switch between them. So that was a quick primer on projections, and now let's do a quick primer on design. I showed you that pretty map earlier that you guys are going to create. Here is a junkie map made on the fly. Look at that terrible north arrow and that weird inset map, and the fonts are nuts. And this is where ArcPro really shines, and you can really dig into the design elements of your map and make them gorgeous and useful. And so I have this snapshot here from Ken Field. Some of you might know him. He's one of the chief cartographers for Esri. He leads a series of design workshops, and he's written a couple books. One just came out last week, I think. Anyway, he always says, go beyond the defaults, just try to dig in a little bit. And so you can make something, instead of the thing on the right, you can make something like this, which has a lot more, there's better balance. The map is nice. It uses the full area nicely, subtle legend, nice inset map, font is clean throughout. There's some very simple choices you can make that make your map, as I said, useful as well as beautiful. So with that, we're going to stop, and I'm going to turn the screen over to Sean.
All right, very good. It's always a perfect intro to what we're going to cover today. One moment while I share my screen. There we go. Okay, just a couple things to cover before I really get going. And because we found in the past there's a couple hurdles sometimes that people face that slow them down, and it can interrupt or kind of mess the workshop up for them. And one of those is making sure that they have all of the data. So at about 11 a.m. this morning, I sent out this email to everybody. If you got the Zoom part, you might be referring to the Zoom email I sent the other day, but also inside here we have the presentation that Maggie just gave, the workshop exercise that we'll be working from here very soon, and the data for the workshop. It's about 1 gig, shouldn't be too bad for downloading. One key thing though that has mess people up is they've downloaded the data, put it on their computer, and then didn't unzip it or decompress it. So you got to make sure that gets decompressed. You can, in your file browser, you can look inside the file folder, but you can't use it in the GIS if it's not unzipped. So if you haven't received this email, make sure that you raise your hand in the chat, and one of us will help you out with that. All right. The next thing, and I'm going to reduce this down. I have a lot of things open you can see here. The other thing is trying to figure out the real estate on the screen and being able to see what I'm doing, being able to look at the directions sometimes, and then being able to see what you're doing as well. Ideally, you have a large screen or a multiple screen, which makes life a lot easier. But I know in these times of lots of Zoom practice, we've got this down better, but still, what I recommend is setting up your workshop exercise directions that you downloaded from the email I just showed over on one side. Personally, I like to set up my GIS right in the center. And this is bigger than it needs to be right now. And then you might want to have the screen share that you could either overlay on top of the directions or put on the other side of the screen. So just try to figure out the real estate as we get going. Another hurdle that we've run into is people's applications not working for them. And fortunately, we have Shane and Robert here, both of which are super pros on this stuff. When I have a question about something going wrong, they're the ones that I ask. And to head off any issues there, let's just do one thing to start with, is go to your ArcGIS. You might have to go down if you freshly downloaded it. I know that some of you are new to ArcGIS Pro, some of you are not, but go into your ArcGIS and open up a new session. So this is just going to be a test. Please open up your ArcGIS Pro. Next, what we'll do is we'll click on Map. When it comes up, it should look more or less like this. If you we recommend in the introductory emails to try to get a license from IGIS. And the reason for that is because some organizational accounts don't have all of the extensions or the access to ArcGIS Online and Living Atlas that we refer to. And so, and this is one of the reasons why we're running this test. But if you have one of our licenses, it should look something more or less like this, wherein we can start a new map by clicking Map. In this case, if you've already downloaded the data, what I'm going to do is point the project to my ArcGIS Pro workshop folder that way I put on the C drive. is the location for where I want to be working at, and click OK. So I'm going to back up and do that one more time. For the data that you hopefully downloaded from here should have been put on your C drive per the directions below. And when we start our project, we'll go to the C drive in the ArcGIS Pro workshop folder that was created and click OK. Next, you can name this whatever you want. I might just say ArcGIS workshop GIS. And I'm putting GIS in there as just an intuitive cue that this is the GIS folder that's going to contain the database and the APRX file, which is kind of the mother file of all of the project organization. So that's why I'm putting GIS, is just so it doesn't get confused with any of the other file folders that are in there. And then finally, please click OK. And the names don't have to be that specific, but once you click OK, and this is the test, and it comes up, I want you to do one thing, and well, a couple things, but for now, what we're going to do is go to add folder. Oh, excuse me. Let's skip that for now. We'll come back to that in the exercise. We'll go to in view. So the view tab at the top, and I'm going to go over all these tabs in a moment, but I want to go through this just in case anybody needs help changing their licenses around or their setup. So Shane and Robert can help you while I give an introduction to just the buttons and levers, where you won't be needing to do anything. But we'll go to the view tab, go to catalog pane, go to portal. So view, catalog pane, portal, and then click on ArcGIS Online. If you get this far and you can see data here, that means your license is good to go for what we're going to do today. If anybody had any problems with that, please bring it up in the chat and Shane or Robert will help you out. All right, very good. So, another thing too, if you please put any questions throughout the workshop exercise in the chat. If Shane or Robert or Andy or Maggie don't answer them directly there, they can moderate and bring those to my attention when there's a good break for it. Sometimes questions are very complicated, and for that reason, we have office hours on Mondays and Tuesdays. So I'm going to go up. If you've been to our website, probably have if you've signed up for the workshop, but we have our training tabs that shows our next trainings, one of which is going to be our story maps and drone camp coming up. But also we have, under our resources, we have office hours where you can sign up for slots for more complicated questions. We love helping you out on what you're doing. It's really, it's just pleasing. It's great to help people continue to develop their skills with this and then use it both either for their work or for their personal interest down the road. It's that's what the whole point of going through all this stuff is. All right. So we have that there. There's other resources in there you might want to refer to. Also, just so you know, we have a YouTube channel with tons of the recordings of our past presentations that you can refer to as well if you want, if you'd like to continue learning more about different aspects of GIS. Some of these are referring to drone work, data with R. So there's a whole bunch of options in there. So I just want to let you know all of those are there for your resources. Good. Now let's just set back, because the first about 10, 15 minutes, I like to give an overview of the application, that being ArcGIS Pro. And the problem with when you first start, if you bring this in, you don't have any data in your project to be able to like really explore the contextual ribbon that's across the top. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I bring up, and so again, you don't have to do anything now. You can just sit back and watch. This is info only for a little bit. And again, if you have any questions, if your app didn't work, please put that in the chat so we can, so Shane or Robert can help you out with that. When you get your data into your project, you'll see that it gets, I would say cluttered, but you can add a whole lot of layers in here. And the contextual ribbon across the top is going to change depending on what kind of layer you're highlighting. So if I highlight this as a vector layer, it's symbolized, and this is comes from the map, the better map that Maggie showed in her presentation. I will have different options that are available to me up here. For example, you can see it says feature layer. If I click on this or the trees, it'll still remain feature layer at the top of the screen. But if I scroll down to something that is a raster, like this elevation model, it'll switch to raster and I'll get another series of options that are available to me. We're going to go through a number of those as we go through the workshop. Another interesting thing about this is, unlike, and I know that some of you, I'm noting the comments at the beginning of your skill level, some of you are brand new to this, some of you are skilled GIS folks, and some of you might be skilled in ArcGIS map or ArcMap, the traditional ArcGIS desktop application, but are shifting over to Pro. So it's being that ArcMap is not going to be supported before too long. So you're shifting over. Well, getting used to where all these buttons and levers are at will, there's a learning curve. One thing I can say to that effect though, is that once you get used to working in ArcGIS Pro, after working in ArcMap, it's really hard to go back because it's much more efficient now that they've worked out a lot of the bugs. One of the neat things about this is that you will have different types of tabs that are available in your window. When we refer to panes, I'm usually referring to this pane over on the side. It can get undocked if you want to pull it to somewhere else. I prefer just the defaults. If I bring up, say, my analysis tools and my geoprocessing tools, you'll see another pane prop up on the side. In the middle, though, typically this is referred to as the window, or in this case, a map window. But you can also have layouts that are included in there. For example, the call out that then is displayed on the map, the better of the maps that Maggie displayed before. This is the reason I'm bringing this up partly is because this is what we're going to work toward today. We're going to work toward getting creating something like this in the end. If you don't, I don't spend a little bit more time, you can have some map layouts that are a little less appealing, where you might have bad contrast, poor positioning, you name it, the things that Maggie covered. So we're not going to work toward this. We will work toward a good layout such as this. But I digress. Back to the map. Oh, this is another thing about this is what led to that thought, was that each of these will have different contextual options across the top. So in the layout view, I have different options than I have in a map view. So that you can see how there's analysis functions here. Layout is not for analysis. It is for display. Back into my map view, and this is where you'll start off working and you'll spend most of your time in general, even though you can spend a lot of time in your layout view as well. In your map view, this is where you're going to organize your data in your contents pane on the side. Typical convention once you get going is to try to include the smallest layers or the layers that you're working on at the top, and then have the larger layers or the ones that you want buried on the bottom. What I mean by buried is that the layers that are on top here will show up on top on your map. And this map will automatically update in the layout. If I change something on the map here, for example, I decide to switch to just all the trees on the research center, and I go back to my layout, that same effect has occurred there. So it's this is where you work on designing your map features or your layers, and in your layout view will be covering your map elements, which is a little bit different. I know that's kind of like parsing terms, but the elements are like your legend, your title, your neat lines, and those kinds of things. Again, that's what we're going to be working towards. As far as features and rasters, we're going to cover the different ways that we work with the with these types of data. Starting at the beginning, we'll usually be working in the map view. So this is an important thing to note right at the beginning, and I'll restate this again and again, maybe a couple times, is if you run into a position where you can't seem to do anything on your screen, the way to get out of that is go to Map and click Explore. Here would be an example. Say I'm selecting something and I have the selection tool activated. I want to be able to move the data around, but I can't now. But if I go back to Explore and click this, then I can return to moving my data around. So to get out of some of your other functions, Explore is a good tool. There's other options in here. There's a base map that we'll explore. There's one way of adding data that we'll start off with, and then we'll show you another way of adding data. There's selection tools, which I just displayed is how to select features manually on the screen or clear those selections. And we're going to be, that's going to come up more than once during the exercise. There's measuring tools and a number of other options across the map, onto the map tab. Next, we have insert. This is where we can insert new maps. This is how I created this call out, the primer, the new bad map and the bad call out. That was by inserting new maps. Alternatively, I will get at the end, we'll go through inserting new layouts, and that's where these layouts came from, by inserting those tabs in. There's connections, there's add folder, which will be the first thing we do after we take a break, is add a folder connection. It'll make your life easier in the long run. And then we don't need to look at those other options right now. Analysis, though, is really handy. And the tools, and specifically the toolbox, is referred to as your geoprocessing tool, is referring to your geoprocessing tools. And in ArcGIS Pro, I wouldn't say everything, but most things that manipulate the data itself are termed a geoprocessing tool. And what's awesome is you have this search function over here, especially for those of you that are used to ArcMap, the traditional application. Here, if you know the term Hillshade, you can just type this in and you can execute that geoprocessing tool. There's a couple other things that are not under geoprocessing tools that are similar that we'll get to under imagery for your image analysis tools that are will run processes, but not permanent processes. They'll do them on the fly and hold them in temporary memory. So we have the analysis tools. We also have view, which also gives you an option to see your geoprocessing tools, but then these other options that we'll look at just a little bit. Specifically, the catalog pane is, every time I click on view, I'm usually on my way to the catalog pane because I like using this pane for exploring the data. And then there's also Python windows and a number of other options that are available. Moving on, edit. Edit will matter if, say, I have a feature highlighted here. I can't do an edit on a raster. So if I click on a raster, the editing options will not really, they won't apply. But if I click on a vector, I can start creating new features, or shifting them. There's a section in the exercise that refers to this, but we may not cover it. If when we go through the exercise, we'll see the number of sections that are listed is optional, and carefully when I designed or I redesigned this workshop exercise, I figured out what were not essential steps for getting to the end product, and I made those optional. However, and this is one of the ways that we typically like to formulate our workshops, is trying to design them so it gives you all the information that we wished that we had when we first started. And it's really hard to pack that much into like about 2 hours, 2 hours and 20 minutes of workshop exercise. But I do want you to have those at your disposal, so you can look at how to do editing or creating features and those kinds of things in the directions on your own time. And then if you do have questions, you can always come get us in the office hours. All right, back to the other options here. Imagery, this is where you'll have raster functions that we'll review. And then a big one that we'll be looking at is appearance. Appearance will differ between your vectors, again, and your rasters. So if we have, this is a vector, or the trees are a vector here, we'll have symbology options that are much different. If I click on Symbology, it'll come up in a new pane on the right side of the window. Since this is a Symbology pane that's open on this side, if I go down and I find a raster like this and I click on it, you'll see it entirely changes because it has different ways of being displayed. And we'll look at some of these other these image options that I mentioned before that are kind of similar to geoprocessing, but are temporary. Or more specifically, they don't alter the underlying data, but they display the data in a new way that's much more efficient than having to create whole new layers in a lot of cases. The last thing that I want to cover before we take a quick break, actually two things. One, and they're related. Let me go to the actual exercise. Is the layout of the exercise. You'll notice that when you go through it, there's numbers and then with decimal points. One of the reasons for setting the exercise up like this is that if you have a question, you can go in the chat, you say, I have a problem on step 7.7, for example. And so we know where to look to see where at what point you're maybe running into problems. I will be presenting, and in general, you'll probably just be following along with what I'm covering. But if you do refer to the exercise and it comes up like that, then that's a way that you can we can get on the same page with you really quickly. The other thing that I mentioned that I wanted to cover is the metadata. Maggie touched on projections specifically that are being of importance. The reprojecting data is optional in the workshop because it doesn't really say it doesn't matter in the end product that we're doing it today, but it can matter a lot. So the projection information is important, but not necessarily what we're doing for our final product in this exercise. However, there is something to recognize, is that the first layer that goes into your project will dictate what the map projection will be. And for that reason, we'll be loading in a drone image that was collected at our Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center that covers a field that we have, what's called Pacline data, is a very sophisticated system of where they've put RFID numbers on the trees, and when they collect the fruit from the trees, it gets bundled together and then goes into a conveyor that runs through this Pacline system. That then they record all kinds of information like the weight, the roundness, the coloration through an automated system, and that data has been put into this Pacline CSV file. The reason why I'm noting this right now is this is actually a fairly realistic use of GIS for either research or management in this case, where you can have your GIS information get ancillary data about the site and then retie that data back to what you're mapping, and it gives you it's very powerful for displaying a number of attributes about the site that isn't visible just in the imagery itself. And so that's what we'll be doing today, is we'll be taking this data here, tying it together with tree-point data that then is joined with this Pacline data that then we can create new symbology for the map that's compelling, that tells a visual story. So that's where we'll be going with this. But with that said, let's take we usually don't take enough breaks. That's a comment that we've had in the past. And so we're always trying to improve the way we do this. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back, and then we'll just go for about a half hour, and then we'll do another 5-minute break. That is, unless someone has any questions or are having any problems with their GIS, in which case, I can't see the chat quite yet.
Yeah, there's nothing in the chat, so I think break's a great idea.
Good.
So back at 2 o'clock.
Excellent. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, back at 2 o'clock, maybe 2:01, and we'll get going again. And if you have any questions or troubles, put in the chat. All right, we can get going again now. Let everyone take a seat. It's good to get up and stretch our legs every so often. I like to say that doing these exercises sometimes are a little like driving in the fog. If you do it for too long, it gets to be more challenging. But with enough breaks, I think it goes pretty well. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to jump off. We've already created a map. So if you came in after we went through the first step, no, I think everyone was probably here by then. We just went to ArcGIS Pro, opened it, and then selected map. And this is where we should be at this point. And the one of the biggest things that was most challenging when some of us started doing GIS is getting data. And fortunately, Maggie mentioned, there is tons of data online now. Both on ArcGIS Online directly or through the more vetted Living Atlas. And we're going to refer to some of that data during the exercise. And that was one of the reasons why we brought up the catalog here at the beginning, to just to test that functionality on your system. If you have a private license or a temporary license, oftentimes those options are not available to people. Good. Now that we have this up though, I want to start off by adding data to our map. So what we'll do is we'll go up to the map tab at the top. Oops, excuse me. We're going to go to Insert, and we're going to click on Add Folder. So again, go to the very top tabs, click on Insert, Add Folder. And what we'll want to do, and this is because this is the last place I was working from, it automatically goes to my C drive, but you might have to click on your computer, this PC, and then go to your C drive, and then click on the ArcGIS Pro Workshop folder that we created there. The reason why I have everyone put it on the C drive is typically every PC has a C drive, and it's at a high enough level that it's easy enough to get to your data. By default, ArcGIS likes to put your data down kind of like a keyhole of directory locations, and it gets to be a hassle. So setting it up at a C drive at a high level is very convenient. So, but we're going to click on this folder once, not twice. So at that level, and then click OK. The reason for that is because one of the ways that we'll add data in a moment will be through our catalog. First, we're going to add it a different way though. So did everybody get that? That's a time-saving quality of life step right there, is adding a folder directory. You can also do it in your catalog pane by right-clicking and adding folder connection as well. ArcGIS Pro likes to have functions in multiple places sometimes. Now we'll go back to map, the map tab, the very top, and we will actually I'm going to stretch this screen out a little bit so we can see it. And we'll click on add data. This is the traditional way of adding data to ArcGIS projects. And inside this add data window, now because we added the folder connection, we can click on this drop down here, and the ArcGIS workshop folder now is visible to us. We can go inside of that, or with the little triangle drop downs, and then click on Mosaic. And on the side, you'll see the Mosaic pop up. One thing is, if you double click that, you will see that it has 5 bands within it. We want to bring them in all at once, so we're not going to go that deep. We'll do is we'll click on Mosaic again in the window here. Then just click this once, left click that is, and then click OK. This is the drone image that I mentioned before that we collected over what's actually field or orchard 64 West at our Lynn Cove Research and Extension Center. And we're going to practice or work with some colorization of this here in a little bit. But what's important to know though is that because this is in a UTM or Universal Transverse Mercator, Maggie mentioned in the projections, we have a variety of Universal Transverse Mercators, one of the most common. And that's what the projection of this is. And so the rest of our project will be displayed in this same coordinate system. If we want to see information about this, what we can do is right click. You can see all these different options, but down at the very bottom, you'll see properties. You click on this, and under you have general information initially, but if we want to see the source information, this source layer, it's a raster. It's got the name. It's in vertical units or in meters. But what you can do is look here to see what the spatial reference is. WGS 1984 is a datum, and Universal Transverse Mercator, or UTM zone 11 north is the projected coordinate system. It says Transverse Mercator. I just wanted to highlight this just so you can see that there's a whole bunch of options under your properties. If you right click on this layer, and you can go and see these kinds of this information about your layer. Now though, let's add in some more layers. So the first step we're going to really go over is just putting your data into your project. And typically typically depends on the type of project. Often you'll be adding in a bunch of different layers, some of which you might want to use, some of which you may not, but often you'll be adding in more than you need. And a large part of the process is organizing and setting up your layers so they can be displayed appropriately on your map. So just right off, I want to just put in a whole bunch of layers. The way that we added this one is through the add button at the top, but that's not my preference. My preference for adding data is through the catalog pane. And to get there, let's go up to the view tab at the top, fourth one over, the very top, and underneath that you have catalog pane as an option. Nice thing is, if you hover over things in ArcGIS Pro, it gives you prompts to tell you what they do or what they are. So I'm going to click on this, and then on the right side you'll see the pane pop up. Under folders, we can click this drop down triangle, And then below that, we have the ArcGIS Pro workshop folder that we link to. And then you see a bunch of different data sets that you've downloaded from our Google Drive. The first of which is a boundary layer for our research center. So to put this in there is pretty easy. You can right click and you can say add to current map, but what I often do is just click on it once, drag and drop, and there it is. But wait, it's on top of the other layer that's in covering it up, burying it, as I call it. So what you can do is go over to your drawing order on your contents and just drag it down below the smaller raster, and there it appears. Back to the way that it was before, but with the boundary layer below. Another convention is, other than just dragging it and dropping it right into the window, is you can drag it into your contents in the order that you might want it to display. Next, we can do the drop down for the triangle next to DSM. That's short for digital surface model. So it's an elevational model of the site derived from the drone imagery. There's a backup, by the way. The reason why there's a backup in there, we don't need to worry about that right now, but there used to be a step in the workshop that if things went wrong, it corrupted the underlying layer. And so we had to have a backup to be able to refer to. In the last 2 generations of ArcGIS Pro, that bug seems to be worked out, but I left it in there just in case because it held people up. So again, we're going to go to the first one of these is the 64 West DSM. Click on that and just hold, drag it over, and drop it underneath the image mosaic that we see there. You can see it drop into the contents. And if we want to see it now, what we can do is just click on the check mark above it on the mosaic to turn this on and off to see this surface model below. Let's do it with the next surface model, but it's not just the surface model for this field, it's for the whole entire research center. We'll grab this, drag it over, and drop it below the 64 West one. Now, if we zoom out, you can see that we have a surface model for that whole area. The DTM, click and drag that over on top of the one that you just added in. We've already added in the mosaic. So we'll do the drop down for NDVI. That's short for normalized difference vegetation index. This is a relative measure of plant vigor. Clicking this, we'll drag it over and drop it right below the mosaic. So let's look at that one a little bit closer. This is I'm mixing up the steps a little bit from the exercise. These are covered in there, but not necessarily in the exact order of what I'm going through right now. But later on, it will, in the exercise directions, it'll refer to zooming to layer. Let's just do that now. And the way that works is you click on that NDVI layer that you just added in. That's a right click. Go up to zoom to layer, like a third of the way down. Click there and it jumps you right to that area. But again, the mosaic is covering it up. So what we can do is turn off that top layer, and then you see this NDVI display of the field derived from the same data set that we just turned off. And turn that back on. We'll work on changing the symbology of that shortly. Next, we have the Pacline data. So I'm back to the right side under the catalog. And please put in the chat if I'm going too quick. I want to make sure that I pace myself so everyone has a chance to do this, but at the same time, I'm not going too slow. So under the catalog, do the drop down for Pacline. You see that this is a CSV file. What we can do is grab that and just drag it and drop it onto the window, but you won't see anything happen unless you go over to the drawing order or under the drawing order of the contents, drag all the way down and you'll see a standalone table. That's the table that was the comes from the sensors in the Pacline the Pacline instruments. We'll link that up with spatially explicit data shortly, being the trees, that is. And then finally, we're going to go to projects. We're going to skip trees for right now. The reason why the trees one is in there is because occasionally people have access issues, and I want to make sure that there's an option for them to do this workshop without having access to the online data sets, and so they can get to the end, specifically for people that we put this up on our YouTube channel and they refer to the directions the later time with practice exercises or different licenses. So under projects, we'll grab the 64 West field, drag and drop that on top of the LREC boundary on the left side in the contents. And then the LREC projects layer, drop that on top of the boundary. All right, so now we've added in a whole bunch of different kinds of data sets. But you'll see that they're kind of clustered up, but they're not well organized on this contents pane on the left side here. In fact, it's really difficult to see what's in there. Oops. Because I have the explore option set, I click on something here, it'll give me information about that position on the screen. We'll actually be using that shortly. So once this is all in the contents pane, the way that I was having you put it in to start was, it was a little bit of a time saver because I'm used to the data, but just putting it in a way that it's going to be set on top of the other layers or grouped together. So they, so like types of data are next to each other. And we're going to take that a step further. And this is how we're going to do it. I'd like you to go to the 64 West DSM and just click it once. Then press Control on your keyboard. Click the next DTM, and then click the LREC DSM. These are all elevational model data sets. So let's group them together into an elevation folder. And what we can do, once they've all been highlighted, right click, and then the third option is group. What that did is it created a new group that I can collapse and expand that has those three in a similar style or similar type of data sets all together. And because they are all elevation data sets, I can slowly click this twice, highlight it, and call this elevation. Click enter. Alternatively, I could have right-clicked and went in and said, let's see, properties. I could have went to properties and changed the name here. I was looking for rename. Different location in the app. So now we've put our elevation data sets together, and now we can turn them all off and on at the same time. So we'll just turn them all off. One of the reasons why I'm having them grouped together in this way is because one of the next steps is we're going to practice symbolizing, or sometimes it's called changing the style. Style is the way that's called in ArcGIS Online or in QGIS. Symbology is how it's referred to in ArcGIS Pro or ArcGIS ArcMap. So now we have our elevation set. Let's do the same thing with our polygon layers. So we have our 64 West field, our LREC projects, and our LREC boundary. Let's add those all to one group by clicking the first one, then pressing Control and clicking the other two. Before clicking right-clicking and going up to the top, third from the top, and clicking group. Now we've created a group of polygons. So what we can do is slowly click this once and then twice, highlight over it, and say polygons. Now I can collapse and expand those. And now you can see already, look how much tidier our contents pane is. It's getting much more, practical to view. Before we take another break, then I want to add one more layer, or actually two more layers in here, because again, learning how to find layers is a huge part of making your being successful with your GIS. And specifically, I'm going to bring in one layer from Living Atlas and one layer in from ArcGIS Online. I have my zoom in the way here, multiple zoom levels. There we go. The way that I'll do that is now, since I have catalog already open on the side, but I want to show you a different way of looking for data, and that's with the catalog view. And the way we can get that up is we go to View at the top, the tab, and instead you see there's catalog pane, but we want to click the one to the right of that, catalog view, and that will pop up in our center window. I should have mentioned earlier, sometimes the first time you open up a newly licensed ArcGIS Pro project, it'll have this catalog window in the center of your project, and you have to close out of that. But hopefully that didn't confuse anybody if that happened to you. But now we have the catalog window in the center of the screen. I want to go and get some data from Living Atlas. So you can see, now this is an interesting thing. Again, contextually, if we're in maps, we see our contents look like this on the left. If we switch to catalog, the contents pane changes, because there's some different options there with the catalog. Specifically, down at the bottom, you have Living Atlas, and we'll click on that once. It'll take a second for it to load it up in the center. And I want to go up here on the top right and type in NAIP. That's short for the National Agriculture Imagery Program, set up by the Farm Service, the farms. Let's see, what is it? The Food Services Agency of the USDA. So National Agriculture Imagery Program data, and clicking enter. And this data is really neat, 60 centimeter imagery of the entire country collected every 2 to 3 years. So what we'll do here, we can click on any one of these, and on the right side, we'll see metadata that shows up, a good description of this data. And this is well vetted data that's been curated again by the USDA. And you have different types of data. We have the NDVI, we have natural color, or color infrared. So I'm going to click on color infrared, and for whatever reason, it's not showing the metadata for that on the side. I have to shut that out or somehow. But regardless, though, if we want to add one of these into our project, all we need to do is, let's go to the the color infrared, right click on this and click add to map. Well, we didn't see anything happen, but if we go back to our map tab, now you see a layer of this on your window. But here's an interesting thing though. This is not stored locally on your computer. This is actually stored in the cloud. And the way we can see that is over in contents. What we're looking at here is our drawing order. But next to that, there's some other options like list by data source, or list by selection, list by editing. There's several options. What we'll do is we'll click on list by data source. And what you see here on this first one is that this is the URL for the data source that this is coming from. And there's you can see the ArcGIS Online services for a world Hillshade that's also included here. But then below that, we have our C drive workshop material. So this is sometimes really handy for figuring out where your data is coming from on you when that are in your project. If you forget, or say you close your project and you come back to it later and you are trying to remember where each thing's coming from. So I'm going to go back to the drawing order now. And this NAPE imagery, if you have time later on, maybe after the workshop, there is directions for clipping this imagery, and which is useful because unlike your background imagery, this can be downloaded and stored on your computer for analysis. I'm going to turn that off and drag it down to the bottom or close to the bottom. Also want to turn off my polygons and zoom out a little bit because this is a good time to compare that NAPE imagery. I can turn that on again. It'll take a second because it's drawn it from online. By the way, because this is a false color infrared image, the red portions of the scene here are for plants that are healthier because near infrared reflects brighter the healthier a plant is. And so that's how this higher level of contrast for vegetation is happening with the red highlight. Red is not inferring bad, it's actually referring good in this case. But I'll turn that off. And I wanted to bring that up because I want to show you a comparison with something else. Going over to map at the top, we can click on base map. Last I checked, there was about 25 of these. Yep, there's still 25 options. A popular one is hybrid imagery. You can click on and you'll see the background change. The thing is that you can't do analysis with this background imagery. You need to bring something in like the NAPE imagery if you want to say clip your data and then make products from that. Just want to show this as different options. If you didn't, if that was a little bit quick, that's not a worry. There is we won't be needing that for the rest of the exercise, but I feel that it's important to know the differences between those downloaded image layers as opposed to your base map layers, and to know that you can get to those image layers via the Living Atlas or the next data set via ArcGIS Online. So for now, let's turn off the world imagery at the bottom, or we can switch it back to topographic as what it was before, much less complicated and easier to load data set, and keep it plain here. We can turn on the polygons again if we want to see this. And this is actually a really good time to take a break, but there's something really important to do first before we do. And we've just loaded data in. There's nothing really critical we've done yet as far as no analysis or anything like that. But before we do that, we really should save our project. So you go up to the top left, click save. It'll remember what you set it to save as to start with. So that you shouldn't have any trouble with having to set up a new name or anything, but we want to save our project every so often. We'll find out that there are very occasionally functions that will break or freeze your ArcGIS Pro project. Not so many anymore, but it's many of us have had projects of not just in GIS, but I mean, you think about other types of projects in the past where things go bad and then we don't want to have to redo all our work. So let's just save it right there, and let's take a 5-minute break until about let's make it 2:35. So how's that? 7-minute break.
Great, Sean. Thank you.
Any questions? Put them in the chat. Thanks, Maggie.
Hey, Sean.
Hi, Kat.
For one of the steps, we're adding the infrared map where we looked it up on the catalog, and it said failed to add data. Is that because of my license?
Yes. Let's see. There's a good chance that is because your license.
Okay.
What license do you have?
I work for Brand at UCSB, so I'm using one of our department's licenses.
Okay. If you couldn't add data in this way, don't worry about it. There's one step, and it's in the directions, but if you couldn't add data, go to your catalog.
Okay.
And under your folders,
Okay.
down at the bottom of your options, you'll see trees.
Oh, is that okay?
Add in the LREC trees layer.
Okay. Should I add that into under polygons or?
You can put it at the top of your drawing order.
Okay.
Yes, and then, but that's the only one, the one that you'll need.
Okay, not the F64 West.
No, that was just a spare in case someone's their analysis tools weren't working.
Gotcha. Okay.
I like having redundancies just in case something like this comes up.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you so much for your help.
No problem. See you in a few minutes.
Hey, Sean, for somebody like Kat, could she go back to her, GIS manager or whatever and ask for a better license, or what do you advise?
Yes, it's a complicated one because it's even from campus to campus.
I know it differs, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're just so lucky to have all of the extensions and all the functionality in our license setup the way Shane is.
Yeah, you could, Kat, just go back and ask him, say, what's the chance that we could get the full capacity,
Right.
Are there different tiers for licenses? So like what tier do you have that I could ask for? Is there a name for it?
Well, there's not really a tier. It's licensed by extension. So there's like a spatial analyst extension, there's an image analyst extension, a 3D analyst, and things like that. So it depends if they've allocated that license to you.
So she could just say, how do I get more extensions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And in general, out of the box, ArcGIS Pro should allow you to at least work with vector data and load imagery, but it may not let you actually do analysis on imagery. So raster data and things like that.
Okay. So then I would just ask, how can I get more extensions? I'm not asking for specific extensions.
It depends what you want to do. I would say if you're going to ask for any extension, at least ask for spatial analyst.
Spatial analyst.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you really want to get crazy, you could even ask for image analyst. That'll open up some deep learning tools and stuff like that.
Cool. All right.
And
if you have any more you suggest, let me know. I'm just writing a list of them.
And one more, just to make sure that your license is set up with portal access to ArcGIS Online and Living Atlas.
Portal access to ArcGIS and Living Atlas. Okay.
Yes. Well, if you have portal access, you probably have access to several options.
Gotcha.
And then Kat, one quick thing, if you're wondering what you have access to now, Sean, if you were to go to project real quick, the project tab.
Project, okay.
And then, I'm sorry, Sean, on your left-hand side at the very top.
Oh, this project,
Yep.
got it.
And then click on licensing.
Yes.
And then Kat, on your machine, when you click on licensing, it'll tell you what you're licensed for.
Ah.
So that'll give you an idea of what's installed and what's not.
Gotcha. There's a whole bunch of no's here.
Yeah. that might be the issue. Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. This is very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Our pleasure.
I think we can get going again now. Right. Just so you know, just the way the direction we're going to be moving for the next, let's call it 20 minutes, 25 minutes. We will continue. We'll add one more data set in, and then it's going to be mostly all about visualization of your data, both your raster and your vector data. I want to change the symbology and the style of these vector files and your raster files. After that, the next like 20 minutes or so, less than that actually, will be about doing some very simple analyses and joining data and some queries. And then the last half hour of the workshop, I want to focus on the cartography portion of the exercise, making a nice layout that we can work with for this data. So that's where we're going. Be visualization, a little bit of joining, querying and analysis, and then finally the cartography. So with that said, let's add one more layer in here. And so if you're looking at your data, it doesn't matter what the center screen looks like right now, but make sure your catalog pane is open on the left side. And if it isn't open, go over to View and Catalog pane, and it'll pop up here. And what I want us to do, this is unlike the catalog view where we added data in before from here. We're going to add it in from the pane. And what we'll do is we'll click on Portal. And I just told Kat how to work around this. So if this doesn't work for her, this is not, you don't have to worry about it. But because I redundantly put in the LREC trees data in the file structure, but that is also hosted online through our organization. So under Portal, I want you to go over to the right, second from the right, where it says ArcGIS Online, and click this. And then in the search area, type in LREC or LREC _ trees and click enter. So when you go in, you'll see there's actually 3 sets of data. If you hover over them, the first one, you see it's a feature layer hosted. And I just uploaded this yesterday. And the reason for that is because our other 2 layers, one that was uploaded by Maggie and one that was uploaded by Shane or Robert, neither of those are hosted layers. And that actually jams up some people that don't have the right extensions. So I wanted to make sure that the data was in here in a hosted format. So this is the one that we're going to want to add to our project. The way that you do that is you right click and then click add to current map. So the first one should be LREC trees. It's hosted in my name. And there we have a whole bunch of vectors. And roll in and out. I hope everyone has a mouse or a trackball that they're working with, because this is really hard to do sometimes on your touchpad. It's like that in most GIS applications. But I digress. Here we go. We have now all of our trees in. Again, this comes from not from our current data set, but it's actually coming in from ArcGIS Online, from the data set we just added here, the LREC trees. If this wasn't hosted, you wouldn't be able to automatically do some analysis functions and some visualization functions on it, like filtering data for attributes. But fortunately, this is a hosted layer, so we can jump straight to the next step, which is, well, actually, we're gonna come back to this. That's right. I said I was gonna change up and have the do more visualization right now and less about the querying. Once this is in, though, vectors are going to, their style is going to be changed a little bit differently than rasters. And the way that we can do that is if we click on one layer here, go to appearance at the top, you'll see these options. Among them, you have a swipe function. We'll come back to that. We have transparency. Blending is really neat. We're going to do that here very shortly. Symbology, though, that's what we're really going for right now. So right here where it says Symbology, click the drop down. And you can see a variety of graduated symbols. We don't need to worry about all of those right now. We can just go with a single symbol or just click on Symbology on the icon, and you'll see this pop up over to the right in your Symbology pane. Alternatively, you can just click on the dot on in your contents. If I click on it, it'll go inside of the to the symbol specifically, similar to this. But if I click on the dot here, so if you're looking at this, click on the symbol, the dot, and let's change it to something a little less overwhelming. See that huge grid of dots is just a little too much. So let's just click on circle 1. Now that's way too much as well. But we can change the properties. So this is just the gallery of options. The next one is click properties over to the right, and black's probably fine. We're just looking at the vector points for the trees all through the research center. But the size of these points are 10 points. That's way too big. So let's drop it down to something like 3 or 4. And then click apply. Maybe even go down to 1 and apply. Now you can see where the dots are much more, I don't know, they're not overwhelming, dominating the map. A little bit small, but it's okay. You can also play with some of the other options in here if you want, or the size of the properties or colors for that matter. Key thing though on creating your maps is just look for contrast. Sometimes black will be good if it's overlaying a color, but if it's overlaying a shaded area or like say a true color image, it might not be the right option. Mapping is largely contextual. But for now, we can just leave this the way it is. Next, we're going to work on some of the polygons. I'm going to turn off the layer here, the mosaic, turn off the NDVI for right now, and even turn off the trees. So we're just looking at the polygons. So you can turn off and on these options across the top. So you just see what you want to see. And on the polygons, I'm going to click the little triangle next to it that drops down. And there are two, at least the 64 west fields on my map. I know that depends on the defaults they come in on your map, but they're a little too close together. They're not distinct. So I want to change this to something that's going to kind of make it pop out a little bit. So the way I'll do that is go to this block below it and click. Go over to the right, Symbology pane, and go to Gallery. So Gallery is the top left corner of the Symbology pane. And under this, I like the black outline, dark black outline. Now we got something that's going to stand out. But we might want it to stand out even more. And one way you can do that is go over to Properties. So next to Gallery is Properties on the top of the Symbology pane. And you can see the color, the outline color is designated as black, but there is no inside color. That's what the checkered refers to. So what I'm going to do is click the drop down next to that and make it something like bright red. So you get an example of that down on the right. But you always have to click apply. Sometimes it says run, but usually the apply or okay down on the right hand side. And now that's the way it is on the map. Let's change a couple other symbols so they pop out a little bit more. On the LREC projects, let's just click that one. Go to Gallery. Just make it black outlines, maybe thinner black outlines, so that the thinner one might be more appropriate, since you want to have things pop in the hierarchy of what's most important. And since the map's going to be about this field, we probably want to have that be in the boldest. Lastly, let's change the background of the actual research center to something that's going to be just different. And we can click on this. So remember, you have to be able to get the symbology options for what you're looking at, what you want to change. You actually have to click on it in the contents pane. So when I click underneath the LREC boundary, the symbology options for this layer is what pop up. This time I'm going to click on the black outline again, but that's too similar to the rest. So instead, I'll go up to Properties and change it to something else like a dark blue that's going to give it a little bit of distinction. Click Apply. There we go. So we have we have a little bit of kind of unique and interesting symbology now for those vectors. We're going to get a chance to play with this a little bit later. But I just want to give you a little introduction, and I want to make sure there's a little bit of time too that you can explore some different options, because we're going to not just do this in this pane here. We're going to also make a call out pane that's going to be similar to this later on. And by doing this work here, it saves us time later. Next, let's do some rasters. So the thing with rasters is they don't rasters symbology changes depending on the type of raster. And here's an example. In the mosaic, which I'll turn on now, and I'll right click it and go down about a third of the way where it says zoom to layer. I'm going to zoom into it. So here I have this this raster layer. We're zoomed in nicely to it. This is displayed in 3 bands. So red is displaying band 1, green is band 2, and blue is band 3. Here's the problem is if you and this is in the metadata, but the band order isn't correct. And the reason for this is typically like an RGB image comes in is red is in 1, G is 2, B is 3, it's RGB. But in this case, it's multispectral data, wherein red, or the first band, is actually blue, 2 is still green, but 3 is red. And then there's a 4th band and a 5th band that are available as well. The way we can see that is if we click on the drop down on the symbology on the right, you can see there's 5 band options. We briefly saw this earlier when I had you double click it and you looked inside of the layer and saw the 5 bands before we loaded it. Instead, we loaded it in as 1. But we do have we have different ways of displaying this. The issue is that this, even though this looks like the correct coloration, it really isn't. So if to correct this, I might go over and click on band 3 for red, and blue is going to be band 1. Because 1 and 3 are actually relatively similar in reflections when it comes to vegetation, it didn't change it that much, but it changed it a little bit. But what I do really like to do is, now you mentioned that I'm a remote sensing kind of specialist. So every time I look at vegetation, I really like to look at it with a false color infrared if I can, because it accents the vigor of the plants more. So let's set this up now. If you go up to the top, so we have appearance still highlighted. We're still on our mosaic, so it's highlighted here in the drawing order. This is important. I'm going to click the band combination option here. Go down and click custom. So what I'll do here is I'm going to set this as band 5. So red is actually going to be displaying on the screen. It's going to be representing the near infrared. Green is going to be band 3. So green is going to be representing red. And blue is going to be representing green, which is band 2. And what I can put in here is CIR, or false color infrared. That's a short abbreviation. And say 532. Just so it designates what kind of band combination is. And then I'll click add. And look what we have now. We have an automatic option for changing to a false color infrared. Sometimes you do want to have the actual RGB, the natural color, for displayed. And here's a way to do it. This kind of like I'd say a workaround, but it's just a way of going about that is go over into your contents pane, right click on this layer. So the one that we just changed, now it's being displayed here, 532. I'm going to right click on it and say copy. Then go up to the top of the map and right click Oops. Why isn't it, I don't have a paste option. I did click copy, right? So click copy.
You may just have to click, yep, exactly on the word map.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Paste. Good. So now what we have, so what I did is I right clicked it, copied it, went up to map, right clicked, paste it, and then I'll drop it down. It's just a neat little effect. I'm going to drag it so it's right on top of the other one. So they're stacked. It's the same layer. It's calling in the same underlying data. So if I click on and off the top one, nothing will change. But what I would like to do though is go down to the bottom one and change the band layers back. So I'll click on this, and over in the symbology, I'm going to switch this back to 3, 2, 1. You'll see nothing has changed, but that's only because it's below. Now, if I turn off the top, it's kind of like a voila. Here we got the true color. This is useful sometimes for kind of comparing different types of imagery. Is we can use the swipe function. You have to highlight it in the contents, go up to your appearance, and right down left of your appearance, click on swipe. And we can drag over this and you can see the underlying true color. Now, when you first start looking at imagery, looking at true color might be more intuitive. Later on, the false color infrared might be more appealing. But let's take this a step forward. So that's how we work with a 3-band data set. But there's other types of data sets too. We're not going to do this with this data, with this layer here. But you also, I'm just clicking below symbology. There's also stretches and then vector fields. Really, I don't use vector fields virtually ever, but the stretch I do. But I don't typically want to use that with a 3-band image like this. What I would use that for is something like an NDVI. So let's turn off these first 2 layers and turn on the NDVI. In here, what we'll do is we'll click on the symbology. Again, this is a good, even I do this sometimes. If I click on it and I don't see what I'm looking for, I have to make sure that I actually have clicked this on the layer, the NDVI layer in the contents. It's important. If it's not highlighted here, the functions for it won't be available in the contextual ribbon or in the contextual panes. Now, if I click on the drop down, you can see there's various different options that are specific only for a single band, in this case, a continuous data raster layer. So an image, instead of having like an RGB image that are composited, what we have here is just a single layer that's showing different levels of NDVI, or normalized difference vegetation levels. But we want to adjust this because this is not quite ideal. It's not, I don't know, it's just too blinding, I guess, not appealing. So what we can do is go over to the color scheme and pick out something intuitive, like green to red. So again, if you click on the NDVI, the symbology, then come over here underneath the drop down of the color scheme, find the green to red. I don't know about you, but I see a problem here. And this problem is now it's the opposite of what the mind would think would be right. So bright red is plants, and green is areas that aren't plants. So what we can do is invert that by clicking the invert button over on the right side. And now the nice healthy green plants are green, and the soil or the not alive vegetation on the ground is not showing up as green. Let's do the swipe again. The way we can do that is turn on the color infrared layer, one up, highlight it, click on swipe. And because the next layer below it is the NDVI, look at that now when we roll over the top of it. We can see a measure, a quantitative measure of the plant vigor for those different plants. We won't cover it here. There's just not enough time, but in the directions there, you can see how to do zonal statistics on the plants by creating buffers around the tree points. So if I turn on those tree points, they barely show up. I can maybe increase that symbology now that we have. Remember I mentioned before, it's all about contrast. There just isn't enough contrast there. If I bring it up a couple points and apply it, now we can see the points. We could create buffers around there and do zonal statistics on the NDVI values of those. That information might be important to you if you wanted to compare NDVI intensities with the, say the yield or the coloration of the fruit. To say, well, if this tree is more vigorous, it's more vigorous in creating fruit. It's like kind of a logical, connection. So there you have it. There's a couple ways that you can adjust your symbology here. I think that I'd prefer to take a quick break before we do the before we start doing some querying and joining of data, because that's that'll go fairly quick, and I want to make sure we have enough time for our for creating our layout in our call out maps. So let's just back up a little bit here and save our data. Oh wait, there's actually one more thing I do want to do before we take a break. Doing the exercise from memory, I want to make sure I hit all the key points, and that is symbolizing the digital surface model.
Sorry. I need some math.
Right. So what we'll do is we'll turn off the polygons, turn on elevation. So this is what I'll leave you with. This is a really neat step. I'm also going to turn off the layers that are above these two. Well, pretty much, what else is it turned on? Something, oh, that's the elevation model of just the plot. I'm going to expand elevation. So you can see this elevation layer. There's a problem here, and that problem is that this area around it is just all blacked out, and that's just not what you're going to want to see on a map. It's just not clean looking. But there is a way to mask this off pretty easy, and also to symbolize your raster layer, similar to what we just did with the NDVI. What we'll do is we'll go down to, we'll turn off the smaller DSM. The DTM can turn off, so only the LREC drone DSM layer is on. So you see that down there under elevation, LREC drone DSM. We'll click on that, and the symbology pane is still up. So let's pick a color scheme that's good for elevation, and that's under the color scheme on the right. Again, LREC drone DSM. Click the drop down. If for any reason you don't have the symbology pane, you could go to appearance and then click on symbology to get this back up. So under the color scheme, we'll scroll down past the green to red, because that doesn't make sense so much for elevation. But I just know from experience, this one here called elevation 1 is this coloration from kind of a teal through green to brown to finally white. If we click on that, that gives a little better intuitive sense of elevation. But we're not done yet. This is by itself isn't great. We still have that teal area around. So what we can do is go up to map. It's already set, but I want to make sure that you know how to do this in other ways. Go to map, make sure you're set on explore, and go to the teal area here and click on it. And you'll see the value for that area is 0.0000 onward. So what we can do fairly easily is go down to mask on the symbology pane. That's down toward the bottom, sort of. Click on mask. You see that there. And then it's all, by default, it's set to 0. So all I have to do is click this. And here we have displaying our background value as 0. So now it's nice cleanly edged. Let's go up to the top left, click save. Anytime you're doing these kinds of steps, it gets get messed up a little bit. One more thing we'll do, and then we'll take a quick break. We're going to go back up to appearance. Oh, excuse me, not appearance. This time we're going to shift to imagery. So still with the LREC drone DSM highlighted, we're going to go up to imagery and go to raster functions. Just click on the icon itself, because then you'll have them all show up on the right side of your screen. These are very similar to the geoprocessing tools I mentioned earlier, but just re-represent the data for you in a way without changing the underlying data set. And a very neat effect is to create a hillshade. So I know that if I scroll down, it's under like surface, there's hillshade, but it's just easier at the top. Type in hill and click enter, and hillshade will show up. So if you follow it, I don't want to go too quick, making sure that the LREC drone DSM is highlighted. Make sure under the imagery tab at the top, we're going to click on raster functions, type in hill, then go down and click on hillshade. Good. So the raster, we want to click the drop down and go down to the LREC drone DSM. Make sure that's highlighted here or selected. Hillshade type, traditional is okay, but I actually prefer the multi-directional. You can pick either one though, it's fine. Scaling, you can leave that as none or adjust it, but I just leave it as none. 1 is fine. And then all we're going to do is go down to the bottom and click create new layer. Look at that. Now we have a hillshade. But again, you have the outside edge that's not ideal. It's not a clean look when you're overlaying with your base layers. So let's get rid of that as well. Again, the way we do that is we just click on the outside and look at the value. It's not 0 this time, it's 228. So 228 is the outside value. So what we'll go is to the hillshade, which is now at the top of our contents. We'll drag this down in a minute and put it into the elevation data set layer group. But here we'll click on it. Actually, you can click on the hillshade, the color ramp, and go up to appearance. And we're going to yes, we need to do the mask first. Remember, it's 228. We'll go down to mask on the right. Click on the display background is nothing, so no data. But this time we have to type in 228 and click enter, and we get rid of the outside edge. Good. Last step before we take a quick break. I'm going to go up to the top, over to layer blend. Actually, before we do that, recall, I'm going to drag this and drop it down. It'll work from up here, but I want to put it right on top of the drone DSM. So I drug it down into that layer set. So it's right on top of it. This will help. It'd still work, but I would rather have it there to ensure it works. On the next step, we'll click on it here. Again, clicking on appearance. Under layer blend, we're going to click the drop down. And so under dark modes, click multiply and look what happens. Now we have a really neat appearance of that digital surface model accented by the hillshade. You can zoom in and see how nice and clean that hillshade accents everything. I'll just repeat that step one more time. The way that works is I created the hillshade using the imagery raster functions. Then I highlighted, I put it right on top of it in the contents, went to appearance, went to layer blend, multiply that was underneath the dark modes. And that's all I had to do. And there we have a really nicely accented background. Good. Now let's take about a 5-minute break. All right, let's get going again. Make sure that we have time to get this all done. I think we're on track. So I mentioned before, I almost started to do a little bit of stylization or symbology for the LREC trees here. But before we do that, I want to create a subset of those trees. So what I'll do is I'll turn this on again. Oops, when I clicked it, it jumped me away. I'm going to turn on the LREC trees, which are just a little too much there. And we're going to be specifically interested in just one field. Hopefully everyone's back here. Stretching the legs. The step that we'll be taking is we will right-click on this layer and open its attribute table. So the attributes are a vector layer, specific, or anything that's like a point line or polygon, can have these attribute tables where you have each feature on the left that's under a FID or feature ID number. So each one of these is a tree in this case. If I click on them, you'll see you might barely be able to see through the zoom window, but some of them will highlight. If I drag over the top, they'll turn up as brighter cyan spots on the map. I can clear those by clicking on the top left corner, or there's a clear button here as well. So that's just selecting those given features by clicking or dragging over the top of them. But what we'll be doing today, since we don't have Pacline data for the whole research center, but we do for one of the fields, we need to create a subset or query a subset of just the field we're interested in. The way to do that is we'll go over to select by attributes on this table. So again, if anyone came in, we're in the LREC trees. I right-clicked, went to the attribute table, and now we're going to click select by attributes, and you'll get this pop-up window that'll appear. Because that's the table that's already open by default, the input rows are going to be LREC trees. We're going to create a new selection, and under the first drop down, we'll select field. Because if we look at it, if I can drag this over, you can see field has the field number that's associated with it for each different orchard area. Here, we're going to say where. So the option is field. Where field is not equal to, that's a little too much. We'll just say begins with, because some of these are more complex. And on the next box, there's a drop down. You can see there's tons of these. There's a whole bunch of them, but I just know that we want F64W and click apply. And what you'll see on the top right side of your screen is a whole bunch of them that will show up. Oh, I typoed. I said F63W. I meant to say 64. Now I'll reapply. That's what I was looking for. So field 64 now is highlighted. So I mentioned that we're going to, other than querying, we're going to do a little bit of geoprocessing steps. And it's important to know that anytime you have something highlighted, so selected, that is, then any processing steps will only apply to the selected features. If we look down on the bottom, you should see 307 selected. If you don't have that, check your typing, the select by attributes function. So it was the field is beginning with F, and sometimes it might be case sensitive, F64W, all caps. And you should get 307 selected. This isn't, you can't really easily see this. You'd have to scroll for quite a ways because there's 10,000 trees on the research center. But if I click on the very, very bottom, if you can see that show just selected records, you'll see just those trees. One of the fields that we have here, one of the, not referring to the field, the orchard fields, but the column header fields is FID LOREC. That's the FID for the Lynn Cove rec data that would be analogous to those ID or RFID numbers for each of the trees. And if I go all the way down, you can see that there's a full set. Now, for comparison, let's take the contents pane. You can see here, drag it all the way to the bottom to where you can see the standalone Pacline data CSV file. Right click on this and click open. You'll see another table show up. Well, as it so happens, that same column is here. What we can do is we can join this non-spatially explicit, meaning it doesn't have geopositioning associated with it, table of numbers to these trees because they have the same number here. But we need to do that after we export or the features that are on the that are being displayed in cyan on the map. So I'm going to X out of these now. So just X out of them so we can see the map a little bit more clearly. We can turn off maybe some of the more distracting layers so I don't pop out too much. And we'll scroll up on the map. There's a couple of ways we can do this. In the directions, it says to do it one way. That's specifically for non-hosted feature layers where you can apply and intersect. But I think that this way it might be a little bit more efficient for you, is go to the LREC trees, right click, go down to data, and export features. What this will do is it will only export the features that are selected by default, if there's anything selected. And what we can do is we can give this a new name like F64W underscore, and we're gonna actually change the projection right now too. So let's say UTM, actually trees UTM. The reason I put the UTM in there, and this is a fairly easy way to change a projection for a vector file, not so much for a raster, you don't do it like this for a raster, but for a vector file, we can go up to environments, and the output coordinate system we can change. If you're really adept at coordinate systems, you can click on the sphere, which then you have to know how to navigate all the different types of projections here. But more easy than that is we can just click the drop down button. So under coordinate system, you can X out of that, get to here, and click current map. Because the first layer that came in was WGS 84, zone 11 north, that's what we'll bring it in as. Currently, because it came down from the web, it was optimized for web use, so it's in Web Mercator. If this looks good, we can check our parameters again. Everything, the name's fine, and we can click OK. And you'll see this pop up at the top of your drawing order. You can now turn off the LREC trees here, and you can see that we only have that layer left on there. This is the one that we want to join with the Pacline data. We don't need to join everything. Maybe I might turn on just for visual effect. I might turn my polygons back on just so I have a backdrop. Oh, that's a little too much. There, so we have those trees here. Maybe I can actually, for the sake of the map, let's turn on the mosaic, the 5-band mosaic, but they don't show up very well. Turn it off again. There's a practice that you just got to get, like, iteratively, you'll just be able to display your data. We'll see at the end, it comes together really nice. It's symbolizing it now without the proper layers for This context isn't really super necessary yet. Because the next step is going to be the steps going to combine this tree layer that we just created with the Pacline data that then we're going to use for its symbology. So the way that we do that, so if everybody's got here and they have just their trees that they've selected by its attributes and then exported, it's now in UTM. Right click on that. We're going to go down to joins and relates. So that's about halfway down. Right click on the new tree layer you made, go to joins and relates and click add join. Under the input join field, we're going to select the FID LREC field. It automatically recognizes the Pacline data CSV file. In my case, if not, you can click it. It should, though, recognize it automatically. And it also recognizes the join table field because it's the same name. Next, oh, by the way, you'll see this little exclamation mark that probably says I need to have it indexed. If I click on that, oops, it's giving me the index option, but you don't have to worry about indexing the features right now. But just click OK. We looked at the LREC tree data before, and we just compared it just super briefly with the tables previously. This time, I want to open up the attribute table now, though, and you'll see that before it just got to fields, right? Now, if we scroll over, we'll see more information, including the weight of the data or the weight of the fruit yield from the trees, the diameter of the average diameter, the volume, so the volume of the fruit, and then a visual grading and overall roundness measurement that the Pacline sensors determined. So we have all this information now that's all associated with each of these features. Did that work for everybody? Before I go on, I don't want to leave you behind because that's going to be an important step. So we join this layer to the Pacline using the LREC FID field.
Chat looks good.
Good. It's important because the next step will definitely not work for you if you don't have that. Let's stylize this or symbolize this now by clicking on this layer, going up and clicking on Symbology. Actually, let's click the drop down below Symbology and go down to proportionate symbols. Holy moly, that's a little too much. But the reason for that is because it's using this crazy large FID field, because it's creating the size of those based on the FID numbers. We don't need that. What we do need over here on the right under FID field, we're going to click weight. All right, that's a little funny. Why did I click the? Oh, I meant I oopsed. I said proportionate symbols. I meant to click graduated symbols. The circles threw me off. That's what I was looking to do. Graduated symbols under Symbology. So drop down, click graduated symbols, and then you have a cluster of points that looks a little bit better. We can zoom in on that, but you see them kind of weirdly weighted down to the bottom. And that's because, again, the field is representing them by the value of the FID number, which makes no sense. So what we'll do is we'll do the drop down and again pick weight. And then you can see a weight value associated with it. Now this yellow isn't very interesting, but as luck would have it, when we turn on over on the left under the drone emission mosaic, that yellow color actually pops pretty good on top of a color infrared image found. We can go down, turn off some of these here, turn off the polygons so they don't clutter up the background. And we are ready to make a map. All right. This is the fun part, by the way. And one of the reasons why a lot of those optional sections in the exercise didn't get, we didn't dive into them too deep, because personally, I love the cartography end of things, and I wanted to make sure we had enough time to do this. Is everybody good where we're at? No. There's no questions in the chat. I'll just plug on here.
Yeah, keep going.
Good. So we're ready to start creating a layout. And the way we do that, we have in the middle frame, we have the map, or in the middle of the window, we have map that we're looking at now, and catalog. We can close catalog now, just so it doesn't distract us. We're going to go up to the top tabs and click on insert. And we're going to click on new layout. I just know from practice that a horizontal letter, the NC landscape, is what we'll want to use. So the second one down, click on this. You'll see a new layout frame pop up, but it's blank. That's not a problem, because what we'll do next is we're going to add a map frame to this, so that we're under the automatically by default, we go to the insert still. Click on the map frame, and you can see the map that we just created. Just click on that. And all we do is we'll go and cover the whole thing. So you see the little crosshair. It might be really small on you're looking at the zoom of my window, but I'm just going to go up to the top left-hand corner, click and drag all the way down to the bottom right-hand corner. Good. And then we just brought this in. And it's okay, it's a start, but it's not really positioned exactly where I want. It's not quite the size I want. And so I'm going to make some adjustments there. And the way that I do that, so hopefully everybody got that, by the way, we added the new layout, and then we clicked map frame. We selected the map in the drop down, and then I just drag and drop this all the way across the map layout window. Next, I'm going to right click and select activate. And the reason for that is, before I select activate, you just watch this if you already clicked activate. If I move anything, it's going to move the layout pane. It's not going to move anything in the map. I can right click though by clicking activate. Now I can move the map around and adjust it to right where I want it, get it to just the right size. If it isn't ideal, if say this is just a little too big and the other one's a little too small, I can kind of find a happy spot in the middle and go down to the bottom and type in a value that I might like 500. So 1 to 500, and it gets pretty good. Good. Note that any changes again on this level are going to be reflected on the map here. So what I might want to do is, because there's a little, I mean, I'm nitpicking here. You see the little structure from the that's in the base map right here. It's kind of, I don't know, not ideal. We can get rid of that easily by going down to the bottom and turning off the world topographic map. So it's just a nice clean background. When I go back to the layout view, it's just nice and clean. Next, what I want to do is start adding in some of our map elements. And there's a fair bit of creative license that you can take with this. And I definitely encourage you to practice it, like play with the layers that are there available, including the NDVI layer in particular, that you can tweak this. But just for now, just follow along with the way that we'll lay this out so we can get the final map that looks like this in the end that I mentioned we're going to work toward. And here, this is how we go about it. First, let's add in a title. By the way, you see this, the credits down on the bottom. Don't worry, we'll get rid of those here at some point. So what we'll do is go up to the top and select layout, close activation because we've adjusted it. We might have to readjust this, by the way, at some point. I'm gonna make sure that this is snapped to the right position on there. And then I'm gonna go up to insert. So note that when you're on a layout view, as opposed to the map view, your options will change across the top. What we'll do first is we'll add in just a straight text. So I'm going to click on straight text. It's the top right, so under insert tab. Straight text is over here on the graphics and text part of the screen on the right. And then go down and just click on the map below the orchard. You can see it comes in little bitty teeny weeny. That's not really what we're going to want, but that's okay. This is interesting. It takes a minute to get used to this, but the way that you adjust your map elements are not necessarily on the screen, where you can kind of adjust them. Like I can delete what's there and type in, say, Lynn. I'll just get us started, Lynn Cove. But it's so teeny, I just hate editing it here. You can zoom in and play with it that way. But a better way to go about it is come over and click on the text on the right, or right click and go to properties. That's even better yet. Includes the symbology panes here and the raster functions, taking up too much real estate. So again, I went to text in the drawing order for under layout view. This is where we can get at the properties that'll pop up on the right side in a pane. Here will be a little easier to adjust the title. So we have Lynn Cove, research, and extension center. Good. And then I want to change the text symbol. So that came in fine. I'm going to go up to symbol, click here. You can see it automatically updated on the map when I switch to the other tab. So under the text pane, I switch to text symbol, and I'm going to go to appearance. This is where we can change the size, the text font. One note, just kind of a convention, it's usually not a good idea to have multiple text fonts in one map. Usually you kind of want to stick with one. Just kind of pro tip, it's not, there's occasions where that might not be the case, but generally find something common like a Tahoma. And I'm going to go down and set it something like 28 and then click apply. And it's fairly good size then. Might even want to go larger. Make it 30. Enter. Good. And then apply. So there we have the title for the map. Oops. I have to click off of it because I actually started shifting it. By the way, nice thing about this is that you can do an undo, and that'll undo the shift that I just accidentally made. If I click off and click back on, then I can move that text box around to where I want it exactly. Let's add another text box in there because I want to have it be descriptive. So let's move it down a little teeny bit too. Because again, I want it to look a lot like this, where we have the Lynn Cove and then a neat line through and then naval orange production. So I'll adjust this to just where I want it. Go up, click on straight text again, and click underneath it. And we'll go through the same process. Fortunately, though, text 1 now is the box that we're working on. It just says text. We can add in there naval orange production. You see how I did that? Just type, I inserted the new straight text box right down below it. You can barely see it. It's just a little teeny weeny speck right there. But when I go up to text symbol and change it to something more appropriately large, maybe something smaller than the top one, like 24 point. So up here on the top right, or on the right side. Click apply. Even go a little larger, maybe 26, and apply. It looks pretty good. Then it will automatically give you snap lines. So it's in alignment with the other text. Good. But now we got more to add to this. So we got a title and a subtitle in there. But if you can recall looking at this here, there's a neat line that cuts in between them. Let's do that. Put in a neat line, and it's fairly easy. Again, we'll go up to insert and go to, let's see, under these options here, there is polygon. So see what I did here is there's the graphics and text. You don't see it initially, there's text box, but if I click on the drop down button, it'll give a number of options, including polygon. So I can select rectangle is one of my options. This will be kind of hard to do at this scale. I might want to zoom in a little bit. Maybe not. We can always zoom in for the corrections. What I'll do is I'll click and drag that neat line across underneath from one side to the other. Now zoom in and adjust it to right where I want it. So it's just nice and fine and not too much. Maybe move it up a teeny bit. Good. We can change the style of that. So did you make sure everybody had a chance to do that? That was from using the drop down. I selected polygon. I drag and dropped it right between the title and the subtitle. And you see that it doesn't have any fill or anything in it yet. So let's do that. Fairly easy. It should have the rectangle options on the top right. As long as it's highlighted in the drawing order, it should be automatically up here. We'll click on symbol. The outline color by default is the black that it came in as, but let's give it something like a dark blue for internal, maybe a little darker than that. Click apply. Now we have a nice clean neat line that cuts across. Good. Zoom out. So that's a good primer into the next map elements that I'll be doing. And what I mean, a map has to have a legend, right? It's like you don't even know what you're really looking at here. But so we need to insert this in and make a couple adjustments while we do it. Let's just get it in to start with. And that's an easy one. We go over across the top, under insert still. Legend, click on this, and then drag a square on the top left side. You're going to get more options in there than you really need. There's you don't really need to have the 64 West drone mosaic. I mean, what does that mean to anybody? So we could change that for sure. You also see that you have these really long multiple decimal point values for the dots that don't really make sense either. The problem is, well, I would say it's not a problem, but it's kind of a problem. You can't do that here. You have to fix those in the map. Remember, this is drawing the data from the map below, and some features or some in a dynamic kind of legend like this, you have to adjust this in the symbology in the map level. So we're going to leave the layout and go to map. And here, the name also, by the way, I'll just flick back and forth. You don't have to do it. You can see there's these underscores and so forth, and the weight is not as descriptive as you might want. I'll come over here and just slowly one click and then two click, and then just give it a new name. We could say Orchard. I might have to start at the beginning. Orchard 64W West navel oranges. And then below, slowly click this twice, wait. Well, actually, instead of wait, let's call it yield. Yield in pounds. Everybody following there? So I'm just slowly clicking that and changing the names. Now I want to click the top again so it takes, and then I'll go up to my layout and look what we have. The name is changed. But we have this other stuff down here that we still don't want. Let's get rid of that. Under the drop down of the legend, we're going to do the drop down arrow, and you see there's a whole bunch of things in here that we really don't need to have in a legend. It's only displaying what's turned on. So I'm going to go down and check each one of these slowly, getting rid of all of them in the under the legend, and that way only what I want is displayed. Now that's fairly clean now. Except for the one last thing I mentioned was look at all these, the decimals are like, say 5, so what's that, 6 decimals in? We don't need that. Again, we'll go back to the map, click on the orchard one here, go up to appearance, and click on symbology. So we don't have to change the symbols themselves. We just want to change the labels. And the way that we do that is we go over to the far right side on the top, advanced symbol options, and click label formats. Instead of 6, let's go with 1. So you follow that, click here, appearance, symbology, all the way to the right on these icons on the top to the pencil looking thing and with the call out. And here we got 1. And make sure I don't have to say apply. Good. And it's already taken. And so I can just X out of that. And now when I go back to my layout, now we have a really nice, clean little legend that's there for us. Nope. I click out and click on it. I can adjust its position if I feel so inclined. Also see the extension center across the bottom. Now it's time for 2 more map elements that are easily added right now. And that is insert. We're going to go over and pick a north arrow. So if you just click on north arrow, it's going to just give you the default. I prefer to click on the drop down arrow and it gives you some options. The default isn't bad, honestly. If you remember the the kind of ugly map that we displayed, that was this one down here. Yeah, we don't want that. We want to click on just one of the more simple. And again, this is your own creative design option, so you can pick what you'd like. But for now, I'm just going to click the first one. I'm just going to drag and drop it here. So we have a nice north arrow off to the side. Just a note, true north is a good default. Don't accidentally have it go to magnetic north. That throws people off. True north is what we want. And that's on the right side of the options, properties of that symbol. That one's easy, right? So all we did was we went insert, north arrow, drop down, and then drag and drop it onto the map. Let's add a scale bar now, the next one over. So we click scale bar. Actually, better yet, don't just click the first scale bar. This will save you work by not doing that. Click on the drop down arrow, and you can select, and it's your prerogative. I mean, I guess this time, since we're going in pounds of, we might stay with imperial measurements, which would be something like feet, but we want to pick one of the scale bars that makes sense. Preferably, I like the one with the bar on top and the values below. So I'll pick the scale bar on the top right-hand corner and click this, and then drag and drop it over here somewhere. But it's in miles. That's not a worry yet. It is easily fixed. because as soon as you drop it in, the properties are there. So again, we inserted the scale bar, drop down, top right, and drag and dropped it here. Go over to the right and select feet for your units. That's going to be a lot better. The 60 feet makes sense then, not point something of a mile. But the text is a little small, so let's adjust that a little bit too. That text is a little finer than I'd like. So go up to the text symbol and just bump it up a couple to 12 and apply. There we go. Getting there. Hopefully everyone's no one's having trouble with this. It works pretty good. Good. Close enough. Last thing is a call out. And this is actually easier than you might think. I'm not going to get into the drop shadow part that we had on this map. If you have see how we have a drop shadow, that's a little bit more complex. It's take a little bit of time, but we can put in a call out really easy. And the way we do that is we need to add a map. We create a map that's just going to be a call out. So go to new map. And it pops up. We might go down here and double click this very slowly and call it the call out. Enter. So we know which one's which. So we have the map and then the call out. But there's nothing in here. It says a map, but it's you don't see anything. Well, we already have these layers prepped before. I mentioned earlier that there was actually, for its time savings, there was a reason why we were kind of changing the symbology the way we were. So I'm going to just scroll down to the polygons and just right click this and click copy. Now, I move my zoom window, go to the call out, right click on call out and click paste. But we have to turn on the ones that we want, which will probably be all of them. Or at least the boundary and the field that we want. But that background layer is not going to pop as much as I would like. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the symbology for that. So again, what I did is I just copied and pasted the polygons from the map, pasted them into the call out map. I'm going to click on the symbol for the boundary, the LREC boundary. Click on the symbol here. And instead, I'm going to just make the background or the outline color black, but I'm going to give the inside like kind of something dark like this and click apply. Good. We actually have enough time. You know, there are some more advanced people in here. Let's do the shadow really quick. We have plenty of time. So what we'll do now, we have the this layer in. It looks good. And we can turn off the world topography and the hillshade in the background. So it's just a nice clean call out map. Let's go in with this layer highlighted over here. We're going to go to the layers. Go down to offset. Oh, wait, hold on. All the way to the right. We got to go in and add an effect. So we got to go to the far right with the wrench structure. Go down. You see the gray. That's the one that's being displayed. We're going to select duplicate layer. So that's just to the right of the grayed out under the wrench. And now if I scroll down, now there's another one that's duplicated below it. And what we'll do then is we'll go back to the layers. Now we have two of them, one that's on top, one that's below. We'll click on the second one and adjust we can even make the color darker if we want, because we're going to create a transparency for it. Good. Now we'll go to the wrench again, all the way to the bottom. Oops, I got to scroll this down. So I have to expand it, add effect. We're going to click move. So the like fifth one down. So then that move effect is an option. This is a kind of complex, I know. So for those of you that this is more advanced than you need, don't worry about it. I know there was like a half a dozen kind of more advanced people that might be interested in this. We'll shift yet again back to layers. Now the move effect is an option. I'm going to click down on this. And I want to see which one this does. It casts a shadow out. Oh, wrong way. I'm going to make this 10. So you can see down on the bottom the direction the shadow is being cast. Then I'm going to make this a -10. You see how it's casting a shadow down? Under the color, I'll do the drop down. Click color properties, and I can set the transparency to something like 70-ish. Click OK. Now we've created a shadow of a layer, and I click apply. So you see how now we have a nice clean shadow? Next step, super easy. All we're going to do is we're going to go back up to the layout. Close these options over this option here. I'll zoom in a little bit. So if you didn't go through all the shading, don't worry about it. The next step's going to be just the same for you. What we'll do is we're going to add a map frame, top right. So under insert, so we're on the layout tab. Under insert, we're going to add a map frame. We're going to select our call out. Drag and drop that down here on the right corner. It's going to take a second for it to appear, and you can see that it's scaled completely wrong, but that isn't an issue. If you recall, all we have to do to adjust that is right click and activate. And then we can zoom in as we feel so inclined. So it's just the right spot. Good. And then we go up to layout, close activation. So again, I had to activate to adjust it. Now this frame, the properties are showing up, and you see this dark line around the outside. We might not want that. The way that you get rid of that dark line is it's automatically defaulted here on the right side. We go over to the third one over, the pencil, and just reduce the outline border to nothing. And now when we click off, it's gone. Good. If you can see, this looks a whole heck of a lot like what we were working toward here. I mean, you can shift the size and the position a little bit, but it's really dang close. But there is one thing that is an annoyance for a lot of people. I'm going to get this centered nicely, is the credits across the bottom. I mean, it is important to include credits where they're due, but where they place them and how they place them isn't necessarily what you want. Often it isn't. So I'm going to do is zoom out just a little bit, and I'm going to go up to view. Wait a minute. Layout. Which one was it?
I think they moved it to insert, Sean.
Oh, okay. Wasn't it? Yeah. Oh, oh, there it is. It's far right. Okay, that's odd. Oh yeah, so what we'll do is under insert, under dynamic text, what we'll do is we'll click the drop down. All halfway down or so, you'll see credits, service credits. Click that and click off your map, and it'll remove that from your map. So again, dynamic text, about halfway down or so, maybe more than halfway. You just go service layer credits. You click that and then click off, and then you have a nice clean map as your final product. Good. With 5 minutes left to spare. Now, what we'll want to do then is we got all this done. We'll click save. That's the first thing you do. The last thing you might be interested in doing is going up to share, and you can export the layout. You can save the project file. You can do a number of things. You can sometimes you just might want to screen capture. In this case, if I wanted to export the layout, I could right click and export as a PDF or a JPEG. That's how the slides ended up into Maggie's presentation, which just exports of this. Anyways, let's call it there. I think that was good. Hopefully, I hope that that gave everybody a good start into this. If you already have some experience, hopefully that at least the in part was new. And please don't forget to fill out the evaluation form that we're going to send out shortly. It's really important to us to get feedback. I always read the feedback and I always try to make adjustments to the presentation to make sure that I paste what I'm covering correctly and cover the things that people are looking for. And so, and also it assures us that we're doing a good job sometimes too when we get good feedback. So we love any kind of feedback that you could give. And so please fill out the evaluation forms. Also, if you go through the exercise on your own time, have any questions, because there's a lot more steps that you can go through. We're here for you if you want to sign up for office hours. With that, is there anybody chat comments? We can, there's not too many of us, so we can, I'm going to turn off my share screen. And so if anybody has any comments, please shoot them out there, or any, otherwise we're gonna have a really good Friday afternoon, huh?
Yeah, so just a couple minutes left. So lovely to see you. So Peg Glue said, is this posted on YouTube? It will be, and you guys will get you'll get a note from Sean, a follow-up, where he'll give you the recording as well as when we get it up on YouTube.
I'm going to stop recording right now, actually.
Thanks, Hector.